Oh, Father, we come to you tonight and first of all, we ask that you just calm our hearts and our minds, that we can forget about everything that's going on in this crazy world and just focus on you.
Hey, yes, Lord.
Open up our ears, that we'll hear something new tonight about you, and that we'll grow in our relationship with you, Father. We think of all those that are experiencing some physical difficulties. We lift them up to you. We lift praises up to you tonight. For the report we heard tonight on the cancer cells being gone, Sharon, praise you, Father. That's just such wonderful, and we give you all the glory for that. And we just ask you to be with us tonight. Fill this place with your presence. In Jesus' name.
Amen. Amen.
Okay. We are in 1 Kings. We're going to enter chapter 18. I'll remind you, if you were not, well, in case you weren't here last week, we looked at 1 Kings 17. And what we enter as we go through the final chapters of 1 Kings and the opening chapters of 2 Kings is a focus not on the kings, but on their prophetic opponents. We look at Elijah, Micaiah, and Elisha. There is a wonderful shift of focus on them. And the shift is on them because the kings are horrific. And even though we're told Ahab and his wife Jezebel, who's a Sidonian, that how horrific they are, that they have introduced Baal worship in an extraordinary way into Israel, that's about all we need to know. Because if we know what that is, Baal worship, that's almost enough. That should, if you know what it is historically, which we've talked about, you almost don't even want to spend time talking about it. And it's wonderful that the shift goes to the prophets and what they're doing to fight it. And we're going to see even more tonight. I think it's going to be very eye-opening, so pay attention. Because there's a lot to see. And there's a lot to see concerning the moment we are in. And how the church needs to act as a prophet. And I think you're going to like it. I just know it. So here we go. Chapter 18. Elijah has been a wanted man now. And at the 3.5-year mark of the drought, it is time that he pays a personal visit to Ahab, the king. It's time for him actually to come out of hiding. Remember, he's been in hiding for quite some time. We're not told really what happened between the time he shows up and he says, ain't gonna rain, Ahab, because I says so. And don't forget, Baal is the god in charge of the climate. He's the weather god. And Elijah simply says, no, he ain't. I work for the one who is in charge of the weather, Yahweh, the God of the Bible. And to prove it, it ain't going to rain. I'm telling you that. And then God sends him, as we know, to the only apparent water source, a private water source, an oasis. And he's there for a long time. Apparently 3 years. Now, during that time, his water dries up, if you remember. And he goes, God sends him, in the dead center of enemy territory. And he goes to the house of a widow who's pretty much out of food. And she's got a son. And he says, you're supposed to feed me. I'm hungry. And if you feed me first, I promise you, your food will never run out. You've got to remember that because of what's going to happen tonight. So you feed me first. Watch what happens to your food. And then there's this miracle of multiplication of food. Her oil, her flour, just keeps multiplying. Never runs out. At one point, the boy dies. Her son dies. Elijah says, bring him to me. And remember what Elijah does. It's very strange, but he stretches his body out over his as if to kind of keep it warm, And he prays that the boy would come back to life, and the boy comes back to life. First raising of the dead in the scriptures. Well, it's time to come out of hiding, which tells us that sometimes God has his servants stay out of sight. Sometimes God has his servants stay out of sight. He was God's asset, and he appears when needed. Keep that in mind. Time might come where God keeps you out of sight. And then he will call you out into the public again when necessary. Chapter 18, if somebody will read the first 6 verses.
And it came to pass after many days that the word of the Lord came to Elijah in the 3rd year, saying, Go present yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain on the earth. So Elijah went and presented himself to Ahab, and there was a severe famine in Samaria. And Ahab had called on Obadiah, who was in charge of his house. Now Obadiah feared the Lord greatly. For so it was, while Jezebel massacred the prophets of the Lord, that Obadiah had taken 100 prophets and hidden them, 50 to a cave, and had fed them with bread and water. And Ahab had said to Obadiah, Go into the land to all the springs of water and to all the brooks. Perhaps we may find grass to keep the horses and mules alive, so that we will not have to kill any livestock. So they divided the land between them to explore it. Ahab went one way by himself, and Obadiah went another way by himself.
Okay, you got the scene? So God tells Elijah, go see Ahab, and in verse 2 it simply says Elijah went, and that's what Elijah does every time God tells him to do what to do. Tells him what to do. And when God's word comes to you, do you go? God just told Ahab to go to a man who wants him dead. Ahab wants Elijah dead. But God says, Elijah, I want you to go to Ahab. He's the most wicked king to this point in the nation's history. Elijah must trust that God is going to keep him alive. God's somehow going to protect him. And we'll see what happens. Very interesting when they connect. But on the way, Elijah runs into somebody. Who? A guy named Obadiah. Now, he's in charge of the palace. He's in charge of the palace. What else are we told about him in verse 3? A devoted follower of God. So this guy, Obadiah, he greatly fears the Lord. He loves the God of the Jews, of his people. And it says, that he revered the Lord greatly. And when Jezebel was killing off the prophets of the Lord, Obadiah hid 100 of them in caves, provided them with bread and water. Okay, so he was like those who hid Jews during the Holocaust. How he smuggled food and water for 100 people hid in caves, I don't know. That must have been a difficult task. How do you do that and you not get found out?
In the middle of a famine.
In the middle of a famine. I'm sure he had some help. And I look at that and I say, you can be used by God to save lives even if you work under the nose of the godless. God can use you no matter what you are if you are faithful and you revere God like Obadiah. It's amazing, huh? Okay. So, somebody please read 7 to 19.
Now as Obadiah was on his way, suddenly Elijah met him, and he recognized him and fell on his face and said, Is that you, my lord Elijah? And he answered him, It is I. Go tell your master, Elijah is here. He said, How have I sinned that you are delivering your servant into the hand of Ahab to kill me? As the Lord your God lives, there is no nation or kingdom where my master has not sent someone to hunt for you. And when they said, He is not here, he took an oath from the kingdom or nation that they could not find you. And now you say, Go tell your master Elijah is here? And it shall come to pass, as soon as I am gone from you, that the Spirit of the Lord will carry you to a place I do not know. So when I go and tell Ahab, and cannot find you, he will kill me. But I, your servant, have feared the Lord from my youth. Was it not reported to my Lord that I did what I did when Jezebel killed the prophets of the Lord? How I hid 100 men of the Lord's prophets, 50 to a cave, and fed them with bread and water? And now you say, go tell your master Elijah is here? He will kill me. Then Elijah said, as the Lord of hosts lives, before whom I stand, I will surely present myself to him today. So Obadiah went to meet Ahab and told him, and Ahab went to meet Elijah. Then it happened, when Ahab saw Elijah, that Ahab said to him, is that you, O troubler of Israel? And he answered, I have not troubled Israel, but you and your father's house have, in that you have forsaken the commandments of the Lord, and have followed the Baals. Now therefore send and gather all Israel to me on Mount Carmel, the 450 prophets of Baal, and the 400 prophets of Asherah, who eat at Jezebel's table.
Did you catch all that?
Yeah.
Okay, there's a lot in there. First off, when Obadiah sees Elijah, and he's like, "Is it you? Can it be? He's been gone. He's been missing for quite some time. Elijah. He's the superhero of the day. He's like all of a sudden Superman appeared. He went back to Krypton or something, and now he's back, right? Or wherever he's from, not Krypton. And so here is Elijah, and it's like that's the best news in the world. As if there was ever a time for this guy to show up, and he's already got a reputation as being this powerhouse of God. It's like, I think Obadiah knows, it's showtime. You know what I'm saying? And Elijah says, this is what I want you to do. Go tell Ahab, I'm in town, I want to come talk to him. I'm alive. And how did Obadiah respond?
He was scared. Very afraid. Really?
He's okay talking to Ahab, but he doesn't want to bring this particular news. Why?
Because he's fearful that Elijah won't be there when Ahab goes looking for him, and that it'll come back on him.
Right? You got the report Obadiah gives. He goes, listen, I don't know if you understand, but he's looking for you. And he has sent word, like, he has scoured the land for you. And everywhere he goes, if they say, well, we don't have him, we don't see him, we're not hiding him, he goes, you better swear and you write your name on this, in blood. Because if I find him alive and you've been hiding him, you're dead. And he goes, what's he going to think? He already knows I hid somehow it sounds like Ahab knew. Maybe he didn't, he kept that maybe from Jezebel. But somehow it appears Ahab found out. Word got to him, he knew. I hid the prophets. What happens if he thinks I was hiding you now? What if you were one of those prophets in the cave? I'm dead meat. I'm a dead man. Elijah says, don't worry about it. I will see him this very day. You just tell him I'm alive. I want a meeting today. Okay? Don't worry about it. Is that what he said? Okay. Now, he comes before Ahab. Ahab sees Elijah. What are his first words? 17.
Is that you, the one who's been ruining Israel?
I love it. Is it you troubler of Israel? Really, Elijah? He's got to cause the trouble? Let's unpack it. He answers, I haven't troubled Israel. You have. And your father's house. Because you have forsaken the commandments of the Lord and you have followed the Baals. So Ahab, he doesn't have Elijah arrested when he has got the chance. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. That's really weird. Did he lose his nerve? Why didn't he? He's been looking for Elijah. Why doesn't he call for soldiers? Run him through. Does he somehow automatically come under Elijah's authority? And he doesn't even realize it? Maybe Elijah, when he finally saw him, there's one thing to, in your mind, in your imagination, I'm going to get that guy one day. But then you actually stand before him and You're not so tough anymore. And maybe Elijah's a bit intimidating. Maybe literally the presence of God on him is intimidating. Maybe Ahab is very convicted. He loses his own confidence. Elijah's public enemy number one. And Ahab grants Elijah's request. And this is how it is. The Judeo-Christian beliefs and values and presence in America are not the cause of America's troubles, as the progressives said. You know, it was never a problem until they began to redefine and impose their priorities to change America.
Come on.
You with me? They are the real reason for America's troubles. And if you stand to confront any of it, you are the problem. You are the hater, you are the phobe, you are the whatever.
Racist.
And Elijah, he had no problem turning Ahab's accusation back on him. And that's exactly what we need to do more and more. This passage, it's enlightening for the very time in which we live, because we so often are told that a weak church is the problem, because it could have stopped it from happening. Now, so today I'm behind the curtain. I was interviewing Senator Jim DeMint. You all know Jim DeMint? Hopefully that's a household name. If you don't, you should look him up. You should know him. Stalwart, conservative, former U.S. House and U.S. Senator, U.S. House of Representatives and U.S. Senator from South Carolina. He then became the president of the Heritage Foundation. They're the ones that helped compile the list of potential judges, including Neil Gorsuch, for President Trump to elect. They're actually the ones that helped handle Trump's transition team when he became the president. Jim DeMint he's a rock star in conservatism. But in our conversation today, he was talking about the church and saying this kind of thing, that the church is sick, the church is weak, we're a big part of the problem. I agree to an extent. And that's only because human nature and the rebellious to God will be rebellious even if the church is strong. Since when do we stop people from being evil? All we can do is offer them what we know, a relationship with God, a time to reason together about human nature, fallen nature, their own predicament. Do they even recognize they're in trouble in here? And until they do, it's really hard to bring somebody to believe what we believe. First, they have to believe, I got a problem. I'm sinful. My paradigm is incorrect. What if they don't see that? It's really difficult to bring them to the faith. I mean, the people who become Christians are the ones who say, I got problems. I'm fallen. I got issues. I'm sinful. You name it. And then all of a sudden they go, I need God. I need a church. I need something. And all of a sudden they start to, find faith. It's very interesting. So the church can be strong as possible, but we're not going to forbid. We do not stop evil. We can only influence people. And then they, by the act of their self-will, it's a choice they make, that they decide to follow God's way and to die to themselves, pick up their cross, follow Him as Jesus calls people to do. Elijah, he is going to address the Jewish leaders at this showdown. And I will say again, even though given what I just said, the church is not solely responsible, a weak church is not solely responsible for the condition of a weak nation spiritually, but all, because humans are humans. But when the church is weak and spiritual leadership is lacking, it is then a race to the bottom. We grease the slide of a nation to become depraved. When the church becomes depraved, where's the restrainer? Where's the voice? Where's the conscience of the nation? It's not. It's gone. Okay. So, as you saw, like at 19, he says, "Now therefore, have all Israel," and this all Israel, not literally the whole nation. It's talking about the leadership, political and spiritual. "Have them assemble for me at Mount Carmel with the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table." Very interesting. So before we continue, I want to say Elijah wants to help Ahab understand that he is the reason for the climate change. Now listen. What do you know? Drought, famines existed long before carbon emissions and greenhouse gases. And cow farts. The California taxes ranches over. Okay? What do you know? Climate changes. There was drought. There were famines, right? Ahab is the reason so many people are dying and many more will die unless there is an immediate transformation in that culture. This is key. God is applying pressure on Ahab by way of the climate. Ahab cannot deny any longer the desperation of the hour. And he, like the widow from the last chapter, can't blame Elijah for it. Nor blame God. It's Ahab who is to blame. It is Ahab who was supposed to know and keep God's law in the land and in his own life. And one of those was not to intermarry with foreign wives who believe in false gods, because it's going to lead his heart astray just as it did King Solomon. And Ahab can't fight the climate with his armed forces. Like Barack Obama tried, remember that? Back when he spoke to the armed forces and he says, you're going to fight climate change. How do we, what? Do we shoot?
Yeah.
Shoot the
At the clouds? Yeah, what do we do? Okay. Remember that, what a speech that was. I want to know why Ahab would grant Elijah's request.
I think deep down he knows it's true.
But don't you think because he was feeling some conviction himself that he did know that, he didn't want to put all the blame on himself, of course, but because if he did that, then he would have to look and say, whoa, what have I done?
What against 850 though?
Maybe he truly believed in his prophets and Baal, and he thought, well, this is an opportunity to get Elijah out of the way. I can discredit him right here.
Figured God's on his side, right?
Throw the ball
He knows everything.
Ahab?
No, Ahab's thinking Elijah knows everything.
Oh,
He's got it. Check me.
he's got me. It's very interesting. You wonder, which one is it?
Well, he's so desperate he's willing to try anything. He hasn't been working the last 3.5 years. Might as well give him a shot.
Do you think he's wagering that he'll come out on top either way?
Yeah. He's the king.
He's the king. Nobody can remove him. I wonder. It's very interesting. Now, Elijah, he didn't say what he wanted to have happen on Mount Carmel. Just that he was calling a meeting. I assume that Ahab thinks he's about to put Elijah, the lone prophet of God, on public display.
Yeah.
Make a mockery of him. And then have him killed. Don't know. Don't know for certain. I wonder if there's a little part in Ahab left going, I hope he's right. Because actually I can't stand being married to Jezebel anymore. She's been a pain in my hide ever since I'm married. The location is significant, by the way, because at that time Mount Carmel was disputed territory between Israel and Phoenicia. And both countries, they had altars to their gods up on the very top. And you might even say that the priests of Baal had home court advantage at this moment. The word Carmel is a contraction of a Hebrew word meaning vineyard or garden of God. And historically, parts of Harmel, garden of God, were covered with dense wild vegetation, and today large parts of it have even been made a nature reserve. It's still just a very beautiful place. But once on top, he is alone on his side of the confrontation, and there's hundreds on the other side. So picture this scene in your mind. Somebody, verse 20 to 35.
Excuse me a minute. He is asking to be put in front of all of the prophets of Baal. If that king has any doubts whatsoever, however small, give him what he wants. Then the prophets take him on, and he stands off to the side.
Maybe that was the idea. It's interesting that Elijah's, he's got to be pretty confident. And we're going to be talking about that too before we're done here, but that he's calling for a showdown. And as far as he understands, it's just him. I mean, there's nobody with him. But you just imagine this guy's confidence. But we'll be talking about it, because we're going to look closer. So in fact, somebody please read 20, and I might stop you here and there.
So Ahab sent word throughout all Israel and assembled the prophets on Mount Carmel. Elijah went before the people and said, "How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him, but if Baal is God, follow him." But the people said nothing. Then Elijah said to them, "I am the only one of the Lord's prophets left, but Baal has 450 prophets."
Let me stop right there. What was Elijah's first question? To all these priests, right, of Israel. Okay? The priests.
How long will you waver between?
How long will you waver, or in the Hebrew, limp?
Limp.
Limp. It's very interesting, okay? So, how long will you limp between two opinions? Your versions may say, or between two branches. The Hebrew word is simpim, and it's the word for both crutch, like a crutch you use when you got a limp, or a bad leg, and opinion. So, was Elijah saying, which crutch are you going to lean on? Whose help are you going to look to? Because you can't look to both. You got two opinions, but they both can't be right. Interesting. Okay, so real quick. The Jews of Israel first allowed and then came to share more than one opinion when it came to God. And to them, that may have sounded tolerant and open-minded to believe in more than one God. After all, they were surrounded by nations that believed in other gods, and Ahab and Jezebel brought religious leaders from their homeland into Israel. And, who's to say Israel's God is the only true God? Because how often you hear that from people, even friends. Who's to say your God is the only true God? So the nation, for whatever reason, began to believe that God wasn't enough, especially when it came to the weather. And when they needed rain, they prayed not just to the main deity Baal, but to the Baals that were mentioned earlier, meaning the fertility and the agricultural gods that were all over the nation at this point. And the people thought they could worship both. They could pray to both. So it's not to the prophets of Baal that Elijah is speaking, but to the leaders of the nation. The spiritual leaders and the political leaders that are Jewish. And I want you to remember the spiritual and political leaders are up on Mount Carmel, and Elijah's calling the question in verse 21. If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal, then follow him. That's kind of reminiscent of Joshua. Remember his question back in his day, choose this day whom you will serve. But for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And after Elijah asked the question, what does it say? The people
Said nothing.
cricket, cricket. Why are they silent? Were they ashamed? Elijah just called out to the spiritual, political leaders of Israel. Make up your mind. I mean, you're limping. Are you? It's why you got this problem. It's why the nation's limping along, because you haven't made up your mind. Are you going to follow the God of our history, of our ancestors, or these new ones? What are you going to do? Were they ashamed? Maybe at that moment they're standing there thinking, oh my gosh, how did we get here? We should be standing over there with Elijah. He's all by himself. I don't know what they're thinking. Did they know that they never should have allowed the false gods a foot in the door? But they've compromised for so long that they've been taking part in these interfaith worship services conducted by the priests of Baal, who are standing right there with them, and then it would kind of be awkward to all of a sudden go over and stand next to Elijah.
Far safer to say nothing.
Yeah, no.
They're going to hold their tongue until they see what happens. They don't know where this is going yet. Which is why verse 22, it says, then Elijah said to the people, I only am left a prophet of the Lord. But Baal's prophets number 450. Look at this. And he points out that it's 450 to 1, which makes the story even greater. But I think that's why he said, I'm the only one left. Because he just called out to maybe those he used to work with. They used to be on staff together. And not one of them crosses over to him. So Elijah spells out the conditions of the showdown. Starting at 23. Would you continue, please? At 23.
Get 2 bulls for us. Let Baal's prophets choose one for themselves, and let them cut it into pieces and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. I will prepare the other bull and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. Then you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord. The God who answers by fire, he is God. Then all the people said, what you say is good. Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, choose one of the bulls and prepare it first, since there are so many of you. Call on the name of your God, but do not light the fire.
Stop right there. So Elijah says pretty much, we'll just say you won the coin toss. You got the ball first. Go ahead.
So they took the bull given to them and prepared it. They called on the name of Baal from morning till noon. Baal, answer us, they shouted. But there was no response. No one answered. And they danced around the altar they had made. At noon, Elijah began to taunt them. Shout louder, he said. Surely he is a god. Perhaps he is in deep thought or busy or traveling. Maybe he is sleeping and must be awakened. I love that. That's my favorite part. So they shouted louder and slashed themselves with swords and spears, as was their custom, until their blood flowed. Midday passed, and they continued their frantic prophesying until the time for the evening sacrifice. But there was no response. No one answered. No one paid attention. Then Elijah said to all the people, come here to me. They came to him.
Let me stop you just for a moment. I want to point out something. In the Hebrew language, Elijah actually says the strong equivalent of, when it says, maybe your God has gone on a trip.
Go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
Good. Some of you may already know this. Does yours version say that? Some versions say what it is. The Hebrew actually is it says. I can't use the English equivalent because it's considered a curse word. But he says, maybe your God's taking a poop. Literally, that's what he says. But he uses a stronger word. I mean, all right, go Elijah. He's cracking me up. Okay, so I want you to notice. It says, do you notice they limped around the altar? that they had made. I want to draw your attention back to when Elijah asked, how long will you limp between two opinions? And it's very interesting. They're actually helping Elijah show Israel's leaders, because it's the priests of Baal. It's not the compromising spiritual priests of God, because there still are. There's still Judaism going on, but they're just combining them. Remember this? It's the 450 priests of Baal doing the limping. And as they're carrying on with their little ceremony, Elijah is showing the priests of God, who are standing back watching this, the origin of Israel's limping between two gods. It began with the acceptance of these Baal worshippers. Okay, keep going.
Then Elijah said to all the people, "Come here to me." They came to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord, which had been torn down. Elijah took 12 stones, one for each of the tribes descended from Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come, saying, "Your name shall be Israel." With the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord, and he dug a trench around it large enough to hold 2 seahs? 24 pounds of water. Oh, seed, I'm sorry. He arranged the wood, cut the bowl into pieces, and laid it on the wood. Then he said to them, "Fill 4 large jars with water and pour it on the offering and on the wood." "Do it again," he said, and they did it again. "Do it a third time," he ordered, and they did it a third time. The water ran down the altar and even filled the trench. At the time of sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and prayed, "Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are the God in Israel, and that I am your servant and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, Lord, answer me, so these people will know that you are Lord, our God, that you, Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again." Then the fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the soil, and also licked up the water in the trench. When all the people saw this, they fell prostrate and cried, "The Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God." Then Elijah commanded them, "Seize the prophets of Baal. Don't let anyone get away." They seized them, and Elijah had them brought down to the Kishon Valley and slaughtered there.
Okay, stop there. Okay, now I'm going to back up a bit. Thank you so much. Great. Back in verse 28, it said they were crying aloud as was their custom. And they cut themselves, this was their custom, with swords and lances until blood gushed all over them. Okay. So here's these prophets of Baal thinking that if they do a little self-mutilation, Baal's going to notice and respond. And in verse 28 it says, as was their custom, they cut themselves with swords and lances until blood gushed out over them. Now, if this was their custom, what do their bodies look like?
Scars. Lots of scars.
I mean, these folks got a lot of scars all over them. Imagine this. And I doubt those swords and spears were sterile. How about the infections in that day? These are just people you just probably wouldn't want to hang around. I want to remind you something I've said before about idols. And the idols that require sacrifice and the gods that require sacrifice. The longer one worships an idol, the greater the sacrifice becomes until the ultimate sacrifice is made of the life of the worshiper. So if the idol is drugs, sex, materialism, whatever the idol you're looking to, it's going to cost you more and more the longer you worship it. Compared to the God we worship, who provided himself as the sacrifice for the worshiper. So here are these priests bleeding out for their useless idol, and verse 30 says, Elisha said to all the people, all right, they're done. Okay, enough of that. Okay, everybody, gather around. Watch this. All the people come closer to him, and first he repairs the altar of the Lord that had been thrown down. So he wants the people to get a really good seat at the show. And he calls them to come up close to the altar and watch. Like I said, at that time, Mount Carmel was disputed territory between Israel and Phoenicia. And both countries had altars to their gods up on top, but Israel's altar to God at some point had been torn down. Who ordered it to be torn down? Maybe it was the same woman that ordered the prophets of God to be killed, Jezebel. She never intended for both gods to be worshipped. You realize that? Her ultimate intention was to replace the worship of Yahweh. Or was it the Israelites themselves? Chapter 19, verse 10 reads, "The Israelites have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword." We'll get to that next week. So Elijah has to rebuild the altar. Could you imagine if Christianity became so compromised we would actually destroy our own faith, our own heritage, our own influence? Imagine a church getting so progressive, so liberal, so open-minded, so whatever, that we literally, it just kind of, it's on this mission to erase itself. Because now it's become enlightened. Do you think that can happen?
Yes, it's happening. God is evolving.
Right. There are entities in our country that want the worship of God to be replaced, as we know. And so they're tearing down the altars. They're tearing down the memorials to God, the history of the work of God in our country, suppressing the voices of his worshipers in our country. And whenever you see that taking place, that is your and my invitation to rebuild. I mean, who else is supposed to rebuild what's being torn down all around this country?
Nobody.
It's us only. Are we going to do it? Are we doing it? I mean, it's why we got to do things like get behind certain elections. It's why we need to show up like tomorrow night. It's why we got to do certain things. Yes, it's going to take time. Yes, it's going to cost money. Yes, imagine what it's going to cost you if you don't step up now. So you read that Elijah took 12 stones, according to the number of the tribes, symbolic of rebuilding that spiritual heritage of the country right there with the 12 tribes that God began with. Nice. It's where, he's rebuilding. To make sure that nobody thinks what's about to happen is a hoax, Elijah saturates, the altar 3 times. Wet matches don't light. And so Elijah is using the most precious commodity in a drought.
Water.
Because he also knows how much water is about to come out of the sky. And this is what he did with a widow when he asked her to use her last cup of flour, and water to make him something because he knows what's coming if she did. And then he prays, verse 36, "O Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known this day that you are God in Israel." Again, why is he doing the showdown in Mount Carmel? He wants people once again to understand there is only one real God. The God of the nation needs to be Yahweh again. You've been believing in these false things, where our country is believing in these false things. Its wokeness is the new religion.
Yeah.
And it's like somehow the church somewhere, we've got to shake them and go, it's a lie. And you're in bondage for it. You want to know why we're falling apart? Like everything is falling apart? We don't worship God anymore. I mean, there's no difference between this moment in Israel's history and ours. This is why we are where we're at. Those who still believe it's something really having to do really with the climate and really with some COVID. Oh my gosh.
Never was.
That's amazing. So. Verse 37, "Answer me, O Lord, answer me." You imagine what this one must have been like. How did he say this? And he's talking nice and loud to God, shouting up to God. "Answer me, God!" Right? "So that these people may know that you, O Lord, are God, and that you have turned their hearts back." Oh, did you catch that? Why does Elijah want God to answer him? So that they would believe in him again, in him alone, and that would be a sign that, by answering Elijah's prayer, it's a sign that he's turning their hearts back to him. Wow! He's going, God, if you do this, it's a sign. And he's saying this out loud. So they understand. The people understand. He can say it differently like this. God, if you light this thing on fire, somehow, it's all wet, soaking wet. But if you do it, what you're telling them, listen up everybody, is that he's not done with you.
Right.
He's willing to prove himself that you've been wrong following this false god. And it's not too late. You can get back to him. We can still be his. We can be his nation again. He'll be our God. Look, he still is ready to do something miraculous. Right? Right? So if you bring fire, you're answering what I'm saying. You're validating what I'm saying. You're not done with us. Okay. How about
Show him.
Then fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt offering. Foosh! Just smoke. Tri-tip. It consumed the stones.
That's hot.
You know how hot that is? You know what kind of fire? It wasn't some little spark, you know, little fireworks sparkler thing. I mean, fire of the Lord right there should tell you something. If the Lord's bringing fire, what kind of fire that? It falls, it consumes the burnt offering, the wood, the stones, and the dust. I mean, I think there's a crater left. Where'd it go? Even licked up the water that was in the trench. Evaporated. What did that look like? Use your imagination. When all the people saw it, they fell on their faces, rightfully so, and they said, what?
The Lord, He is our God. He is
Yahweh, indeed, is God. And you imagine, though, how they said that. How would you have said that if you saw that?
At the top of my voice.
Yeah. What would you have sounded like? And I think that'd be kind of a combination of hiding and begging. Don't do that to me, please. Because you realize if he wanted, he can, boom, evaporate you too. Oh God. Oh God. Oh God. I get it, you know. We've been so deceived. I've been so stupid. You know, I don't know how. I know if that happened to me, if I would have been on the bad side, I'd be weeping, crying my eyes out, pleading with God, and saying, "Oh God, I promise, until I die, I'm following you. You alone. I'm going to tell everybody here, and I'm going to make laws, make sure everybody worships you and you only, etc., etc." You imagine what fierce, uncompromising, committed faith you would live the rest of your life. You would hope.
You would hope.
Do you think this is last?
No. They repeat this so much.
We are talking humans.
We aren't the smartest.
Slow learners.
So we're going to see next week a little more. Let me try to wrap this up. Elijah said to them, "Seize the prophets of Baal. Don't let one of them escape out of that." So the priests of Israel, apparently, I think it's them, who's called the shots now? Elijah's not the king. But I think even Ahab, when you just saw that, Elijah speak up, everybody slack job, everybody's just scared out of their pants. Elijah takes the moment over. He's got that leadership. He calls for the rounding up of these guys. We gonna have ourselves a barbecue. Takes these guys down to the Wadi Kishon, the river that is dried up. And he kills them there. So it appears that God didn't tell Elijah to do this. Elijah just did it. He comes up with the idea of 2 altars. But he knew God was going to show up. That's the kind of relationship he had with God. Now, this is one of these don't try this at home moment. Because I want you to realize that there is a very special relationship that God has with Elijah for God to perform this level of a miracle at Elijah's request. I'm not telling you to not ask God to perform miracles in your life, but I'm simply saying that before you obligate God to a demonstration of His power on live national TV, you better make sure you already have a track record with Him that started with smaller things like multiplying food. But the people fall on their faces. They continue to shout in unison, God, Yahweh is God, Yahweh is God, and then it becomes clear to them, we've been had. Ahab sold us a fake. And in that moment of clarity, that's not going to last too long, there's righteous indignation, and at Elijah's command, the hundreds of Israelites seized the exhausted and bloody priests of Baal. 450, remember these guys are exhausted. They're limping. Cut, slice, poke. What do they look like? And they're just exhausted. And it's like, low-hanging fruit. Get these guys, round them up. The tables have turned. Now, if we had only 450 priests of Baal in our nation, that'd be an easy fix. But we have untold thousands. And they're very well funded and well organized. And our government has married Jezebel and has been endorsing and forcing her worship of Baal in our land. And an increasing number of churches are doing the same because their pastors have married Jezebel. They're even here in this state. I might have told you before, but there's a group of pastors in the state, predominantly east side, that have gone apostate according to the biblical definition. They are pro-abortion, pro-LGBT. They teach that the God of Islam is the same God of the Bible. They've received funding from George Soros, and they don't even hide it. They give micro grants to churches that promote and celebrate these very same things. Something that is interesting is that the next time God sends an Elijah, He is sending two of them as described in Revelation 11. And they're going to have authority to stop rain and call fire down from heaven. It's very interesting. He's going to be able to call them down on their enemies who at that time will have accepted another God than the only God. Climate changers. These guys will be climate changers. Elijah was a climate changer. These two guys are going to be able to hold back rain, call down fire. All of a sudden it hits me how interesting it is that those powers, that authority over the weather, it shows up in Revelation. Why? Well, it's interesting the day in which we live. So much is about the weather. Because people are worshiping Mother Earth. And we need to take care of this and tax this and stop this and have no more, zero emissions and all that stuff, and no cars and no airplanes, and we're going to tax you and carbon credits and, oh my goodness. I think humankind is going down this road. Baal is being worshipped. And I think it hit me as I'm preparing for this, thinking these two Elijah-type prophets that show up in Revelation.
Two witnesses.
They have the power that Elijah had when the nation was worshiping Baal. Our nation worships Baal. The whole world is worshiping Baal. The whole world is going climate, carbon, tax. It's just so bizarre. It is so bizarre. I can't even figure it out yet. I didn't get that much time to even think it all through to articulate what I'm trying to flesh out. But either way, let me keep going a little bit more. Got a few more minutes?
Sure.
Okay, Elijah orders the Baal prophets to be apprehended. It orders them to be slain beside the Wadi Kishon. And it also infers that Elijah's big, he's a part of the execution squad. And he's skillful. With a sword. Now the Wadi Kishon would have had little, if no water. Why would he put these? Why would he say go down here? The river's dried up.
God's getting ready to mop the river out.
Say it again.
Said God's getting ready to mop the river out.
He's getting ready to mop the river out. Right on, Becca. I'm right there with you. That's what I think. That's exactly what I think. Because soon it's going to be overrunning its banks. And it's going to flush the corpses out of the land and into the sea. I want you to imagine that. Oh, goodbye. Nice knowing you. Okay, off they go. That's their burial. And what is King Ahab doing this whole time?
Well,
Crickets.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a, hey, don't do that, you can't touch them. You know, Jezebel, teach him a lesson. I mean, he must have realized he couldn't intervene to rescue the prophets of Baal. He didn't even try. That captain should have gone down with his ship. Mm-hmm. Why didn't the crowd turn on him and kill him? Did they respect his office?
no.
But you know what I mean? How do I say it?
I don't think it's his time yet.
You know, there's people that didn't respect the office or the president, and they called for the assassination of Donald Trump. Hollywood said celebrities and... Now, of course, if you said that about Biden, the FBI would come knock on your door and arrest you.
What knock?
Yeah, what not? Yeah, no warning, right? But it's interesting. I don't understand why they don't turn on him. Maybe the military was still under control of Ahab. Maybe he was just being prudent.
Had Ahab snuck away.
You
Maybe
baby.
God has something else in store for Ahab.
Well, Elijah told them just to get the prophets. He killed the prophets.
And then he told him,
Go.
eat, drink,
Yeah, then he said,
go to
"Hey, Dad, go get
Jezebel's.
something to eat and drink."
And go to
It's-
Jezebel's.
It is very interesting. Can you stay 5?
Sure, of course.
Okay, somebody read 41 to the end, please.
An hour, I don't care.
41 to the end. We're almost done.
Then Elijah said to Ahab, "Go get something to eat and drink, for I hear a mighty rainstorm is coming." So Ahab went to eat and drink, but Elijah climbed to the top of Mount Carmel, bowed low to the ground, and prayed with his face between his knees. Then he said to his servant, "Go and look out toward the sea." The servant went and looked, then returned to Elijah and said, "I didn't see anything." 7 times Elijah told him to go and look. Finally, the 7th time, the servant told him, "I saw a little cloud about the size of a man's hand rising from the sea." Then Elijah shouted, "Hurry to Ahab and tell him, climb into your chariot and go back home. If you don't hurry, the rain will stop you." And soon the sky was black with clouds. A heavy wind brought a terrific rainstorm, and Ahab left quickly for Jezreel. Then the Lord gave special strength to Elijah. He tucked his cloak into his belt and ran ahead of Ahab's chariot all the way to the entrance of Jezreel.
Incredible. All right, so Elijah prays for rain, and at the sign of that first, cloud, the size of a man's hand, Elijah's got a servant. He's got a, personal assistant. And you got Elijah, it says he's just praying with his face between his knees. That kind of praying. You been there? If you can do that? And he's just all curled up, and he's just bowing before the Lord. He's praying. He's not going to look. I'm just going to keep praying, buddy. You just keep running out there, and you tell me, do you see anything? Comes back, nothing yet. Check again. Keep praying. 7th time. There's that number 7 again. Well, I see. There's this little teeny little cloud, about the size of a hand. How small a cloud is that? On that, Elijah goes, "That's it."
It's good.
Really? Wow. Okay. So you imagine a cloudless sky. Imagine how long they had cloudless skies. There was no moisture whatsoever. You know what it's like to see, there's a day, wow, there's not a cloud in the sky. All of January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September. For 3 years, there's not a cloud in the sky. That's the kind of climate change God brought. And the first sign of an itty bitty cloud, Elijah goes, that's it. And I love it. And he dispatches his servant. He says, you get to go tell Ahab, he'd better hightail it to his winter capital in Jezreel. Because in a matter of minutes, he's not going to even be able to cross the Wadi Kishon. It's going to flood. Otherwise, he's just going to cross it. Just dry. Verse 25. But the hand of the Lord was on Elijah, and he ran in front of Ahab.
All the way.
To the entrance of Jezreel, which was, by the way, 25 miles away from Mount Carmel.
Wow.
Now, some people they try to explain this away. Well, it means like he didn't take the road, he took like this past shortcut. I go, no, I believe this. He outran
The chariot.
the chariots.
Mm-hmm.
He outran the horses.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and people go, well, no, you can't do that. And you can't call down fire that burns stones and multiply and walk on water and raise the dead.
And you can't part the Red Sea.
Part the Red Sea, right? You just go, are you believing this or not? The guy outran horses. Well, of course he can. Because his God is God. 25 miles.
America. And he came in first place.
And he came in first place.
That's right.
And he got a medal at the end.
That's right. God gave you
Can
one.
you imagine the king watching his dust?
Eat my dust!
Oh, that's awesome.
Come on, show us up.
Can't you just see that, Corey?
Oh. I love it.
Oh,
That is awesome.
God can.
Did you watch the news today? Did you see what South Carolina did?
No.
They have signed, the governor has signed bills that, no, it was South Carolina. Texas already has it too, but there, no infant from the moment you can hear a heartbeat
Oh, the heartbeat
will be
bill.
aborted.
Good. Good. The heartbeat
Amen.
bill. Good. Good. Oh,
And they said the only other state was Texas that has it.
right? Fantastic.
So South Carolina did it today and they were all
Fantastic.
shouting.
Fantastic. Go South Carolina.
States do it.
Huge. And that's it. I mean, and they're great. What a wonderful story for tonight, especially because there it is. That's what you do. You got to fight back against
Exactly.
the direction of the country. And you know, and luckily,
That's where we're
you
headed.
got, that's why, again, that's why you run Christians for office. You get them elected because of how they're going to vote, what they're going to pass. You get a Christian governor who's going to sign it and not veto it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then you start changing things. You change laws, you change people's behavior. You do. You change hearts.
Exactly.
It's just how it is.
Well,
So,
and
good news.
with the way the country is going now, it won't be that many years before they're sacrificing babies on the altar again.
Right, right.
Via
Yeah.
TV.
We should start with teenagers. I said we should start with teenagers.
No, you can't give them back. I tried.
All right. Well, thank you for staying a little later to go through that. But isn't that just amazing? What a story. And again, you look at it and you say, where are we today?
Does the Bible tell you what happens to Ahab now? It does. Okay.
Stay tuned.
We won't spoil it.
Stay tuned for the rest of the story.
He gets a good ending.
Faster
I knew it
horses.
was, he has to, God has something.
Faster horses.
Yeah. You don't like it. All right. Well, we'll praise and we'll pray and we'll close out. Joey, could you pray for us tonight?
Thank you tonight for the wonderful speaking and the good news we just heard here about South Carolina. Please let us really learn from the story we're hearing, because I feel it truly reflects what we're going through right now in the U.S. and throughout the world. Please give us safe travels home tonight, and bless us all in Jesus' name.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Joe.